Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and the all of everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. You ready? This is your host, Miss La. Let's do this. Hello, everyone. This is Miss La, and you are here on Ignite Intimacy for another powerful podcast conversation about intimacy, sexuality, and romantic relationships. And I have a very special woman on the line with us today. Elise Carr is live and direct from Australia. What's going on, Elise?
Oh, gorgeous lady. It's so awesome to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to dive into a very juicy topic today. So for me, that's what's going on right now.
Awesome. Yeah, it is so wonderful to have you here. I love traversing the airwaves globally. And I love the fact that you can be in Australia and I can be here in Los Angeles. And we're recording this conversation to share with the masses. So how does it get any better than that?
It doesn't, sweetie.
Very cool. So Elise, you have a really dynamic background. You've done some amazing work in your life, and you're highly educated. We're going to be diving into the topic of Tantra, but before we get there, I'd love for us to just kind of like go back into your journey, because you are all about Yoni power, which I'm all about as well. And you've been a runway model. You're an artist, a visual artist. You're an author. You're a businesswoman. And you've also got this whole coaching and holistic healing background as well that involves the work that you do as a Tantra practitioner. So we will dive more deeply into the topic of Tantra, but I'd love for you to give our audience just some snapshots into your life and what led you into the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to share that. So if we go back a couple of decades, my career started at age 7. That's when I started doing modeling and public speaking and being in front of a camera and an audience and all those kind of things, which really, I threw myself in the deep end because I chose to be part of the industry. My mum offered me to do an after-school activity. And what would you like to do, she says. And there was karate and there was this and there was that. And modeling was one of those things. So I was never forced. I chose this. That became my job while I was also studying. And my first degree was in journalism and public relations. So that was kind of, packaged up in a communications degree. And I finished that degree and then I was ready to model internationally and do it full time. And I found in this industry, while I was living my dream, I'd always wanted to do this. I found myself at this interesting point in my life where I was trying to balance what I felt I'd always wanted to do and who I really wanted to be. This to me was a crossroads of integrity. It was a crossroads of boundaries. There were so many different factors. And being someone in an industry like the modeling world, like the fashion world, when you are away from your loved ones, when you are doing your best to, for me, I didn't choose to buy into the sex, drugs, rock and roll. I was very much about the body temple in the best way I knew how in my early 20s. So I was exercising a great deal. I was doing very long photo shoots and long days for shows. I was eating the best I knew how, but probably, not enough, let's say, good fats and probably some protein and things like that. So my body physically was being exhausted. My emotions, absolutely, because I'm being tested by agents who were letting me down, being away from my loved ones, separated from my partner at the time, not, speaking the language perfectly, although I spoke a little bit, but complete, cultural shake-up. I was like being snow globed. And wow. At the same time, my heart and soul went in sync, but also my intellect was kind of hungry. So I started studying Buddhism. I started writing articles using my journalism degree, thinking, somehow I can perhaps live in these two worlds at once. It was always like I had one foot in one world, one foot in the other world. And eventually I got to the point where my body, was so exhausted. I had an ultimatum from my partner at the time to come home or what's going on. You can't have a girlfriend on the other side of the world all the time. And so I had to choose between my career and my love, even though they felt like two loves. And I chose to come home from my partner instead of going on to another country. And while there was a part of me, that looked back on this and thought that was something that I didn't have to do and I maybe didn't make the right decision. The reality was it actually was the right decision, because I came home and within the matter of a couple of days, I was hospitalized with a cyst on my ovary that ruptured. And the toxins that released from that actually, inspired, caused my heart to flatline 4 times.
Oh, wow.
So my body was speaking very loud and clear that something was not in alignment. And the interesting thing was, I had a cardiologist that came in when I was in intensive care and said, "You're disgustingly healthy," because my heart started again on its own every single time. That the cyst was, I believe, because they also, I had every ultrasound test, internal examination you can imagine. Apparently, my whole entire Yoni, the entire sexual reproductive area, was picture perfect, like textbook perfect is what I got told. So I became this special case that was studied in the hospital because it was such a freaky, bizarre, kind of medical phenomenon. They couldn't understand what happened. But
wow.
I realized in time that my body had to do something so drastic to get my attention, because all the energetic signs, all the emotional signs, I was not listening to. I was in my masculine, driving, pushing, believing I'm making my dreams come true, trying to establish myself, just living the dream, I believed. The hero's journey, let's call it, right? Getting out there, ticking the boxes, being successful, and also trying to be a great friend and the most amazing girlfriend and your wonderful daughter and all these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So just ticking boxes. So that was the first massive crossroads of my life. And it was at that time where I was barely able to wash my own hair, let alone shave my own legs. And of course, I couldn't get on a runway. So I wasn't able to model. I wasn't able to get a real job, as my partner at the time called it, in, let's say, journalism or public relations. And I realized that everything I believed I was taken away from me, because soon after that, he left me as well.
Wow.
So I was no longer wearing the hat as model, no longer wearing a hat as journalist, no longer wearing a hat as girlfriend. And this whole world that I constructed for myself ended up just crumbling, and it was just a bed and me. And so I was faced with, dropping to my knees and realizing that I am not the things I do. I am not the relationship I am in. I am none of these things. And I had to really pull back and start, not that I was aware of it as much at the time as I am now, obviously, many years later, but that I had to nourish my divine feminine. And how that started was me having a conversation with my auntie at the time, who lives in the United Kingdom. And she was aware that, this is before social media, mind you, aware that the way I'd connect with my loved ones, the way I'd share what's going on in my life and keep them up to date when I'm away from home, was these epic emails. And I guess that was me kind of nourishing my writing side at the time. And she said, "Why don't you take your emails and turn them into a fab book," as she termed it. And so I did. And finally, I had purpose. I was able to use my intellect, my heart, my soul, pour out my emotions, and really writing my first book, Runway, which now, 10 years on, after so many different trials and errors and the wrong kind of agents and this and that, I ideally like to think I've got the right person now to get this published soon. But when I started writing this, what it was for me was a way to save myself. It was my savior. It was my resurrection. It was my ability to be able to channel and express and heal myself through the craft of writing, which is a very divine feminine process. So getting, that on board, getting my health back on track, I then soon decided to go study my master's in communications, culture, politics, and women's studies, kind of back to back with working in environmental communications. And once I finished that job, I decided to throw myself full-time into the studies. At that time, I also entered Miss Universe. I also did a stint working at Marie Claire. I also did a stint working at TNT Magazine in London. I was doing, once again, a lot of things. And I was like, oh, this is fine. I'm back on track. And I feel like I've got more purpose. And to be honest, entering Miss Universe was actually what my mum wanted me to do. And I was like, sure thing, I'll do this for you. For me, it was also a research technique that I used because I wrote a massive, paper about it during my master's. So that's why I did it, to be a fly on the wall.
Yes.
And I had much more clarity now that me being in the modeling industry was actually about me not being of that world, but just in that world. And I loved being, I guess, somewhat of a mentor to some of the other younger models. I'd find myself backstage and they'd be drawn to wanting to speak to me about life, about relationship issues, about all these different things that they were interested in my thoughts on, which I was never coming from a place of, a dictatorial role. It was really just sharing some love and light and insight and giving them some different perspective on things. So I started to feel into more and more of this mentor role. Once I finished my master's, however, I chose to once again fulfill another dream, and that was leave my entire life once again, pack 2 suitcases and move to Paris.
Wow.
And this is when I started working on the book more. I modeled during Fashion Week and I did bits and pieces like that, but it wasn't something that I put my heart and soul into. I wasn't pounding pavement every day going to castings or go-sees to get more jobs. It was just, if it came up, it came up. I got a job, through a random connection of someone else meeting someone else at a laundromat, and these things just came together. So we're shooting, in the heart of Paris. Amazing.
I love that. And that happens a lot when you travel.
Of course, because you're more open, aren't you?
Yeah,
You're more,
yeah.
It's amazing. You're out of your comfort zone
Exactly,
bubble.
Exactly.
And Paris for me was another time of crash and burn, because I got back together at one stage with that partner. This time it was fully over. I was trying to rebirth myself, I believe. So once again, everything I connected to was being challenged. And I had to do this. I had to die to what once again I felt was living the dream. And so I kind of, put myself through this persecution of sorts, but at the same time, it was one of the greatest gifts I gave myself.
Oh, yeah.
And when I returned, I came back and forth a couple of times, but it was really kind of after a 4-year period of my Paris phase that I fully let go of all these emotional attachments to this great love and another love that kind of came up along the way. And I decided I needed something more to be of service. This is what was coming up. Like, how can I start combining what it is I do? Because I no longer wanted to be the editor of Vogue. I no longer had this like hunger to have to go, walk on the runways of Paris or anything like that. I felt I needed to be of service in a different way. That was my calling. And so I went and studied coaching then, and then I got my Reiki masters, and I studied more of the medical intuitive work and more esoteric, practices. And it was in doing these kind of practices and taking a very feminine, divine feminine approach to the way I was doing things that I was starting to get more in alignment with me. I then became more of a vegan, I'd say. I didn't throw out all my leather goods, but I was no longer eating animals and making very conscious choices. I felt more alignment. I was changing the way I moved my body. I was so many things I was changing, and I felt more and more and more in my truth, in my integrity. Really strong with my boundaries, no longer will, I guess, negotiate things that were important to me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and isn't it interesting how breakdowns just lead to these tremendous breakthroughs?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what it was. And the first one was obviously getting sick, and then Paris and then really my biggest crossroads then came when I was in the heart of practicing what I now offer to my clients, was a guided chakra regression. And obviously you practice on yourself before you offer this as a service to your loved ones and clients. This regression takes you back into your lower 3 chakras, and it enables you to connect with memory that you've stored in your muscle tissue. We're very much aware from an analytical or a psychological perspective we can hold memories in our mind, like in our subconscious, let's say, but we don't always realize that we hold memories in our muscle tissue. As an example, we hold a lot of memory, also known as trauma, in our womb space, and in the entire Yoni space, which is a female sexual reproductive area in general. And so I was doing this guided chakra regression. I kind of got to my 2nd chakra, which is exactly the Yoni space. And I was taken back to a memory that I had consciously completely forgotten about. I was taken back at the time of doing this 7 years prior. I was taken back to a conversation when I was on the street. I saw myself in my dress. It was my birthday night, for the record. I was all dressed up, ready to go with that partner at the time that left me. And we're back together. And we were walking to this little kind of cocktail party his friends were throwing for me. And I was reliving this moment. And in this moment that I was reliving, he was then having this conversation about how he wanted to change his career and go from finance into medicine. And I was like, wow, this is huge. This is a big game. Yeah, how's this going to affect us and where we live? And I thought I might be living in Europe at the time, and all just different things were coming into my mind. And then he turned and looked at me and he said, if I was a doctor, I'd fix your vagina.
Wow.
And here's me in the present moment, doing this regression, reliving that moment that I'd forgotten about.
Wow.
And I saw myself, the 7 years prior self, not say anything, not do anything, just keep walking. And into my party I went. Now that me that was doing this regression, that was in the present, felt this entire bushfire, because we have bush over here, this entire fire build up and travel through my entire body, up until it reached my eyes, and I began to cry. And these tears were of immense release. There was no sadness. And what I realized at that time is how I had given my power away. And that for 7 years, that person who I no longer saw had been taking my power from me because I was choosing to give it to them, because I was choosing to stay connected to a memory that I'd actually consciously forgotten about.
Wow.
So the concept of giving your power away and having to work through then a massive, undertaking of real mystical, authentic, heart and soul driven forgiveness, deep, deep forgiveness with the soul, not just a flippant, oh yeah, you're forgiven, deep, deep forgiveness. And this is what I do now. And the interesting thing was that I realized from that being sparked to then study and look into yonis, vaginas, really let's say vulva is the correct clinical of what he was referring to, that my vulva was perfect, is perfect. And that unfortunately it was his naivete and the issues that we face in this modern world that make people, men and women, think there's something wrong with them. This is why we have an increase of labiaplasty. This is why pornography does not assist in helping a real perspective of women's anatomy be birthed.
Well, and the truth is there are so many different types of vulva. There's, I mean, it's just like penises. There are all different types, So, but if you don't know, if you're not exposed to that at all.
Correct.
And perhaps you are exposing yourself to different forms of pornography, or you've just been with one or two partners in your life, you're not going to know. And I was just speaking with someone earlier, and I don't even think I ever looked at my vulva until I was, I don't know, in my late 20s. So, and
that's not abnormal. That is not abnormal.
Yeah.
Not everyone is curious as a little child and wants to explore and touch themselves. Most of us, really, the women that I speak to and these being clients, have had this suppression put on them where, good girls don't do that. So therefore, they wouldn't have even self-pleasured perhaps, until much later in their life because of this stigma. And this is what it's all connected to. So this really fueled me. And I started studying all different ancient civilizations and practices and beliefs. And I even saw, there's one kind of group out there called Kwadoshka, and they believe there are 9 different types of yonis. And then within those 9, there's variations of that. And they define these types, let's say, by example, like some lips, like the vulva, are tiny and petite and very closed. Some are very voluptuous and engorged. There's a very shallow vaginal canal and a very deep vaginal canal. There are clitoris that really protrude, and there are some that are really tucked away, so you have to find them. It's the same. There are 9 different types of lingam, as we call it, wand of light, it translates as, and that's the penis. So we understand that normal is not a word we should be throwing around here. So it was, for me, that time was this deep, realization, and that fueled me to want to start writing my second book on yoni power and women's psychosexuality, how we give our power away, because that space, that second chakra for all of us isn't just about sex and sexuality. It's about our connection to money, the fluidity of giving and receiving, our creativity, how we express that. And we are all creative. Doesn't mean you have to paint or sing or dance. Creativity is in everything. And then also our power in relationships. And that was, for me, what I was giving my power away to. So I was able to bring that power back, and it empowered me from within to not only write the book, but then to go and dedicate myself to the studies of Tantra. And as of now, living a complete tantric way of life. So I was deeply grateful, and I got to see the gift in this experience, which now I get to guide clients through, is that after a traumatic experience, whatever that trauma is for you, and we have an extremely wide spectrum of trauma, because for me it was a comment. But trauma, once we are able to work through the forgiveness, once we're able to repackage, how it was presented to us as an example, once we've unpackaged it, we can repackage it as a gift and see that there is something that came of this. So for me, that experience has been one of the most transformational for myself personally and professionally, because now I have this deep purpose doing my empowerment coaching, and as a sacred and spirituality practitioner because of Tantra, I am of greater service than I ever have been. And a lot of that is because of that one moment. So I have much love and reverence for that soul, for that comment. At the time, while it was deeply wounding, when I was ready to do the work and go within, which is the heroine's journey, for the record, going within and facing your truth, your ego, facing the shadows. When you are ready to do that, you are in a position to empower yourself. And to me, that is the most incredible gift we can give ourselves, that empowerment.
Absolutely. Well, and if we're unaware, if we're living in the dark, or we're completely unaware or not allowing ourselves to connect with these parts of us that have been deeply wounded or traumatized and choose to do that work and to walk through the fire, walk through the flames to the other side. I mean, there's just this mounting, field of unprocessed energy that's living within our bodies. And it gets stuck in our physical bodies. That's where a lot of sickness is made manifest in our bodies, is just unprocessed stuff.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. Because everything we know is energy. This is science, right? But we have to understand that energy can become matter.
Yeah.
Right. That it can become tangible. So that's why something that starts energetically then shifts to your emotions, then becomes literally manifest physically if you've ignored those first signs. All the more reason for us to become so in tune with ourselves that we can read those subtle, shifts, that we can use our senses. We think our sixth sense, like intuition, is kind of something that we can tap into or some people can't. No, it's really your first sense. We are all intuitive. We're all psychic. We're all clairvoyant. It's just about strengthening that inner muscle as such. So we can totally prepare ourselves in more ways than we can imagine if we're ready to do the work.
Yep, exactly. So, okay, so this is amazing. I trust we're all like following the journey, because it's like these highs and lows and choices that all of our choices are just guiding our path all the time. And you make one choice and that leads you here, and then something else pulls you forward into this thing, and then this happens and this person leaves, and it's the dynamic life journey. And it's ever changing and it's ever evolving. So I think that it's amazing and fascinating just to witness your journey and hear about how some of these experiences just kept guiding you towards empowering yourself sexually in your powerful feminine nature, learning more about things like your chakras, Tantra, dealing with trauma. And now that it's gotten you to this place currently where you've got a business that is built around truly supporting others to come into alignment with their internal power.
Absolutely. And to me, that's why we're here. We're here to be of service and shine our light in whatever capacity it is, because we're kind of lied to in a way by the illusions of the world we think we live in. And if we get sucked into this vortex of illusion, of the magic, of the distraction, of living in social media, of living in the rat race, of living in the hero's journey of having to tick boxes and devote our lives to perhaps a job that we don't even care about, we are doing ourselves a disservice because we're not being in alignment with our truth and our integrity. And I call, like you touched on, choices. And I just, expand that and just say conscious choices, in the sense that every single choice we make, whether it's the food that we're choosing to put in our mouth, whether it's what we choose to say to someone in response to a rude comment, however it is, we choose the way we show up every single day. And when we start becoming aware of how our choices are being made, and if they are coming from a place of consciousness, we start to understand how easily we give our power away, how easily we let someone else manipulate us.
Yeah.
We let something else trigger us. Do not be putting the blame on something else. We need to take ownership for this. We are sovereign beings. We have free will. Right? And we co-create, I say, the divine, the universe. You can call it God, goddess, Buddha, whatever it is. We are in co-creation in the sense that we may be offered a path, but it's up to us to step on that path.
That's right.
We will not be lifted up by an invisible hand and said, off you go, my child. We have to actively take those steps.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
People can be really challenging. It can be scary and it can be fearful. So we have to remember there's nothing to fear. When you're living in line with your true self, while there will be challenges, there's nothing to fear. If we surrender to that, if we can do everything within our power to step up, show up and be our brightest version of self, but surrender to how it's supposed to look, instead of thinking, well, if I do this, I'm going to be retiring at 40 with my amazing car, house, dog, partner, 1.5 children, I'm done. If we can let go of this fantasy, if we can let go of this story, and for me that was, being an international model, I thought that was going to complete me. No. I was already complete. You were already complete. We just have to be able to awaken, or almost reawaken. I feel like we've got this Sleeping Beauty syndrome. We've got to kiss ourselves awake by giving us some love and kindness and compassion and non-judgment.
That's right.
And doing the work, not relying on someone else or something else external to complete you, because you are already complete yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and so I'd love to dive into the topic of Tantra with you and psychosexuality and psychospirituality, because this is a large part of your work. And we've talked about Tantra a bit on different episodes of Ignite Intimacy. However, I'd love for you to dive into that topic, the topic of Tantra, because I think that people tend to hear Tantra. I know I have tended to hear the word Tantra, and I think that it's largely a sexual type of practice, but it's not. And it's a whole spiritual practice. And so I'd love for you to unpack that for us a bit. And, let's start there.
Sure. So as you touched on, there is a bit of a misconception of what Tantra may be. And many people come to the realization that it's not just the Kama Sutra. It's not just sexual positions. It's not only about orgasms. In fact, it's not focused on orgasms. It's actually focused on orgasmic, and that being a way of life and a path. So this isn't a dogma. It's not a religion. It's a way of life. It's how you choose to show up. And that's why me talking about integrity and conscious choices is very much weaved into this lifestyle, because we are on the pursuit, on the path of taking sacred sexuality and sacred spirituality and weaving these two together. So we've got a really strong fabric, which is guiding us towards raising our consciousness. This is what we want. It's just that connecting with yourself or with a beloved to do this in a sacred sexual way can enhance your spiritual journey and can enhance your connection to consciousness. So if we think of perhaps something, just a simple concept that we may not realize is connected to Tantra, but is so deeply rooted in Tantra, it is breath, our breath. And the simple act like we did just before we started our call, we did 3 beautiful belly breaths that you led us through. Now, this concept, we call it deep breathing or full breathing or complete breathing. And when you do this, you are actually clearing out that stagnant energy and replenishing yourself with what we call chi. Now, if you're on a yogic path, you may know that as prana. Now, chi is a vital part of nourishing your sacred sexual and sacred spiritual life. And chi comes in many forms. It's through your breath. So beautiful, clean, deep, full breathing. It comes through the water you drink. Ideally not from the tap. It comes through the food that you nourish your body with, because that food becomes your body. We know the food we eat is then what is taken into your body and broken down to create the cells, to build your bones, your skin, your blood works, all of the above. So making conscious choices about the food is so important. And then the fourth component that brings more chi into our body is sunlight. And how good do we feel when we get to bask in a bit of sunlight? It totally can make us lit up, right? So that's the chi. Chi energy is utterly non-negotiable for our healthy living and for our existence, period. And then we look at our qing, and our qing is our sexual energy. And this is stored in our body. Some people believe part of that is in the kidneys. That's actually your jing. That's energy that your parents give you when you're born. And that's like your backup fuel tank. If you exhaust that, you can seriously be exhausted, such as adrenal fatigue. As you know. So in the middle, we have our sexual energy for women. It's in our ovaries. For men, it's in the testes. So that's why we can lose our energy for women when we menstruate, and men every time they ejaculate. So that's why when you take the path as, a tantric or however you want to term yourself, and choose to live this way of life, for men, part of that practice is learning how not to spill the seed, as we say, to learn to have an orgasm and orgasmic experiences while also withholding the ejaculation. And that may be like, oh my gosh, that's insane. Well, the reality is you can have an orgasm that's like 10 times more dynamic, or some people say 100 times more dynamic than what you've ever experienced before by just having a little 1-2 second explosion of fluid. So when it comes to the women, we learn different practices to be able to take excess energy that's in our ovaries and storing it in our hara, which is, your hara is 3 finger widths below your belly button. So it's just below the belly button and just above your second chakra. It's an energy fuel tank. And when we take the excess energy from our ovaries that normally would be lost in menstruation, we find ourselves having less PMS issues. We find ourselves having less tenderness in breasts, less aggravation, less moodiness. Sometimes for many, when they find their periods are smoother, easier, less heavy, shorter, all the above. Now, this doesn't affect you having children. You're not like taking away eggs, anything like this. It's very much intention, visualization, energy moving, breath work, all these kind of things combined, and it can totally shift your experience of woman. And these kind of practices that you really develop, cultivate, learn, these are ancient practices that have been around for tens of thousands of years. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. I haven't come up with some, fandangle method. I dare not. To me, once you are on the authentic path, you are connecting with what has been around for so long. These ancient practices have worked for so many years. It is something that you honor and revere, just like you honor and revere your body temple. So we're kind of becoming more in sync with where we have come from. And we've lost this connection because in this day and age, living in the patriarchy that we do, living in this doing masculine world, we're so disconnected from our divine feminine, which resides within us. Because if you look at the yin yang sign, there is masculine and feminine in both of us. And we encourage this in Tantra. We say this masculine feminine is Shakti, goddess, and Shiva, God. And so these two energies dance together to create and manifest and raise consciousness. We are creation as women, and men are consciousness, when they step to the divine masculine. And unfortunately, we've lost this connection. Yeah, you go, sweetie. What were you going to say?
So it just makes me think about, as hopefully we're all aware of what's happening, the Standing Rock Reservation in North Dakota in America with the Dakota Access Pipeline they're trying to build on sacred Native American lands. Are you aware of any of this that's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So I just read a post this morning from a woman who is there on the front lines, and she said that they finally allowed the women to be on the front lines, going over this bridge. So basically, the men were really hesitant to allow this because they were fearful for the women, and they wanted to make sure that they could protect them. But the women insisted on leading the charge. And what happened is, as a result, is from this woman's story, from what she shared, is that they allowed the women to proceed, and they allowed the women to go and pray by the water. And, whoever the security is for the Dakota Access Pipeline and whatever law enforcement are there, they actually allowed the women to do more than they've allowed anyone to do so far, and get further than anyone has been able to get so far in this standoff that's happening there. And it just makes me think about the dance of the masculine and the feminine.
Exactly.
And how it's like the perfect visual of a yin and a yang, the women leading the front, the men behind supporting, and just the allowance of that energy to come forward.
And that's exactly it. And if you think of chivalry back many decades ago, sometimes the woman would be in front walking up a staircase, the man would be behind in case she fell to catch her. So this is it. It's
or to get a good look at her.
at her sexy, tushy, and beautiful legs. Darn right, so he should be admiring that beauty. That's all.
I mean, that's my thing. Like, when men don't walk behind me, I'm always I say to them, I mean, wouldn't you prefer to view
It's important to be playful. That's feminine nature as well, for the record of being playful. But back to the Standing Rock, I love this. And I did read a post that I believe a lady shared of another lady's encounter. Maybe this is the same one you read. Same concept. And this is about not men feeling disempowered, but actually them supporting the power that is within women.
Exactly.
Because we need to understand that men have masculine energy, but they also have a bit of feminine energy, and women have feminine energy and a little bit of masculine. But both are equal in their differences. So by the men standing back purely to support and be there still, holding space, standing strong, that is then stepping into their God, into their Shiva, into their divine masculine. That is what they're supposed to do. The woman, creative flow, moving like water, expressing herself, being there, connecting with the elements, leading the way from heart, that is her being in her Shakti. This is why it worked. Because without perhaps, police and everyone else knowing what was going on an energetic level, that was the dance that was playing out. And it is an unstoppable movement. So if we can work in this way, if we can see the power in this and apply it to other parts of our lives, ideally without extremes like this having to happen to shake us up, because this is something that has to happen for the earth to shake up, wake up,
Yeah.
to get humanity to be like, you know what? No, I'm going to take a stand. I'm going to do something about it. Not, well, someone should really do something about this. It's just terrible. No, darling, that someone is you. You, whatever you can do right now, you may not be there. I am on the other side of the world, but you have to do whatever you can do, whether it's talking about it, whether it's educating people, whether it's just making conscious choices
Sending
every
prayers.
day in your own life. Absolutely. Absolutely. Even if you don't connect with any religion, prayer doesn't have to be religious by any means. It is just a way of connecting and sending love and light and knowing there's something greater that is going to be able to assist us if we surrender to that.
That's right. That's right.
So in any way to do whatever it is you can do, that's what's important, because we are all one. We are all a collective of people. We think, oh, it doesn't affect me because it's on the other side of the world. Living a tantric path, being a conscious light walker, not just worker, but walker, this is how you want to like switch on your understanding. We are one. We are connected. And that's right. In Tantra and this sacred sexual and spiritual practice, we are wanting to connect with that which is greater than us. This is what the conscious raising is. And that which is greater than us, however you want to term it, God, Goddess, Divine, Universe, Source, is also within us. We are made from it. We are it. So when you start to see this, you can develop a deeper reverence for yourself, for your beloved who stands before you, for your neighbor across the road from you, and for someone else from a different culture, perhaps with a different religion, skin color, a different sex, still the same. These are just beautiful bodysuits we get to walk around in. We all have divine souls that are housed within these. That is what we need to honor. That is what we need to. So no matter what you connect with, what you believe in, this is so important to understand, whether it's the tantric path or not. It's all interconnected.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, and so how would one come to know about Tantra and about engaging in a tantric session? What would kind of be some of the things that would bring someone to a practitioner like you? People
now more than ever are feeling a disconnection. They might not feel as intimate and connected to their beloved if they're in a relationship. And this might be a young couple. It might be a couple who've been married for 15 years and have children. It can look in any way, but that disconnection is there. Otherwise, it's a disconnection with self. Even if they're not in a relationship, or they want to be, or they've just broken up, it doesn't matter. You can be any relationship status as such. Everyone is feeling this lack of harmony within themselves, this hunger for a deeper connection, for more, but not more as in I need stuff, I need a new car, I need a new pair of shoes. It's something of
more meaning.
We're hunger. Absolutely, sweetie. Yeah, perfect word. Meaning, substance. A richness, something that's really authentic and can't be bought. Right. So that is usually in people's own way of writing to me, however they want to word it, I usually see that between the lines. That's what it is. I want more depth, more meaning. So that's kind of what kicks off this path when you are listening to your call, because this is the energy. This is the subtle little hints that is trying to get your attention. And if you ignore them, then your emotions start becoming a little bit erratic and low for longer times. And it's all a little bit all over the shop. And then if you ignore this, something physical might happen. And for some women, it might be painful periods. It might be cysts on their ovaries. It might be an inability to conceive the child that they, want so dearly. It might be a miscarriage. It might be lumps in their breasts, because usually it's definitely breasts, heart, and that second chakra. Normally we find that with men, it's still the same. It might be that they can no longer get an erection even though they're 27. Yeah. It might be that they're fearful of becoming a father. It might be that they are finding it very hard to actually stop having one-night stands or have promiscuous sexual encounters and connect to a woman, even though they've met someone who they feel an intense attraction to deeper than what they've felt before. This is heart armor. So sometimes it's disarmoring the man's heart and it's disarmoring the woman's yoni. And while I don't do any nudity, I don't do any hands-on genital stimulation, anything like that, I teach my clients how to empower themselves through their own personal practice. So you get lots of joy work with me to go home and in your own sacred space, naked, free and alive, to do the work and come back and we dive into the next lot. So that to me is also very important, to empower people to be able to do it themselves. There's a lot of practitioners out there who, you come for a session and they might do a yoni massage, or they'll do, like a hands-on kind of I'll fix this for you kind of mentality, and then off you go. And while you don't have any tools. Yeah, and you don't have any support and backup after sometimes as well, and you might not be aware of what's going on in your body, and you might then regret it after, like, oh, I've just gone and paid for someone to touch me. And there's lots of different things that can cause a lot of, psychological, almost off-railing, derailing of sorts. So we've got to be really careful when we enter this space of sacred sexuality and spirituality. And to me, it's very important to create a very sacred space, to have that trust very strongly there, therefore having very strong boundaries with my clients, for them and myself, so that we feel really safe in this container, that they can share anything that they want to share, knowing that I'm not going to be passing judgment. There's nothing I haven't heard, really. I'm sure there's probably more things to come, but nothing shocks me anymore as such. So those kind of things are super important as well. And then knowing that you're going to have some practical, tangible tools to do the work. And these tools are something that you can carry with you for the rest of your life. That ideally you might teach to your child when the time comes. Because this is what we've missed. We didn't have Sacred Sexuality 101 in school.
Or from most of us didn't get it from our parents either.
No, and that's no fault of the parents. They didn't know any different. All of our parents did our very best in their own capacity, however that looks, whether we can see it or not, right? They did the best they knew how from their upbringing. It's through the lineage that we've lost it. We've lost our sacred connections that many cultures and civilizations had. They had initiations for young boys and girls when they became adults. They had special time like the red tent when women were on their moon time, menstruating, where they were separated in a beautiful way from the rest of the tribe, didn't have to do their tasks. Food was brought to them. And all the women on their moon time at that stage would massage each other's bellies, would plait each other's hair, would share the wisdom, the elders to the youngers. It was a deep reverence at that time. It was knowing that these women were at their most psychic at that time, and the eldest woman of that tribe would be connected with and asked for her wisdom to lead the people at that time. We've lost that. We lost many, many years ago when all the goddess statues got demolished and all the gods just stayed, unfortunately. Don't get me wrong, I have much love and reverence for men, but we need to see with eyes wide open, third eye especially, that there is equality and harmony and power and strength in both women and men.
That's right. Well, and so talk to us a little bit about the second book that you're writing, the Yoni Power book.
Sure. So I'm still open to receiving interviews, but I have already interviewed many women from around the world, those who want to share their personal Yoni story, however that looks, like as an example, what I shared with that regression for me and that conversation, that trauma. So I've received many emails from women who have shared about their experiences, whether it is gang rape, miscarriage, childbirth, motherhood, not having the knowledge and wisdom they wanted as a young girl, going into relationships, all different personal stories that are kept as confidential that will be weaved into the book. And then likewise, I've been interviewing professionals. So when I say professional, it's someone who works in a professional capacity with women and the Yoni in particular, not just medical doctors. Let's say someone like myself as a Tantra practitioner, or someone who works in the healing arts who specializes in working in that area with women. So there's that kind of element, but I've broken it down into 28 sections, like a 28-day cycle, and each of the chapters dive very deeply and personally often into what I feel are the most juicy and exciting, intriguing, painful, need-knowing kind of topics for women. And it's in doing this and applying a lot of my wisdom, yes, of my teachings that I've been taught by masters, but also making it very current for women in this day and age, what we face, what's important for us to know, and having, tangible, once again, practical little tools and techniques weaved into that. And obviously there'll be, like, even though it's going to be a published book, there'll be still inclusions of links when we do the release to guided meditations and things like that are super important for us to reconnect with that divine feminine, to slow down and to soften, not thinking that's going to be disempowering and we're not going to get anything done, but just knowing that in taking the time to really know thyself, we're actually empowering ourselves, and we'll be able to do better from a place of service and love and compassion than if we bypassed acknowledging our divine feminine power and just tried to strive ahead, push ahead, and essentially try and be men.
That's right.
We don't need to do it anymore. We've passed that stage.
Exactly. And there's something so beautiful about being women and embracing the feminine, and then also embracing the masculine. It's one cannot exist without the other. So
true. It's day and night.
It is. So tell us, how can we find you online?
Sure. So the best way to connect with me is at my website, which is StellaMuse.com, and that's Stella with an A. There's plenty of free videos, amazing, like deep written articles there that will give you some really juicy inspiration. But also you can get my free ebook. Just pop your name in down the bottom of the page. And also on the main page, there's my 4-part video series called The Divinely Empowered Woman. If there are any ladies listening right now, I encourage you to sign up and grab those 4 videos. It's a way to dive into your Yoni heart-mind connection. And when we are connected to ourselves, Yoni heart and mind, that's when we step into our power. And I call that being a divinely empowered woman. So it's all at our fingertips. And if there's guys that are listening, you can absolutely download those videos too and definitely get a juicier and deep understanding of how your woman and the women that you love in this world work.
I love that. So yes, it's StellaMuse.com. It's StellaMuse.com. Elise Carr, what a pleasure to have you today on Ignite Intimacy.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to share this time with you, Laura. Thank you so very much for having me, Stunning Soul. I'm deeply grateful.
Absolutely. And then do you have an email, or is there a contact page on your website if people wanted to reach out about your Yoni Power book or any of the work that you're doing?
Yes, there's a contact page. My email's there. It's elise@StellaMuse.com. So write to me about how you feel I can best serve you, and I'll be in touch when I can.
Great. Wonderful. Well, Elise, thank you again for being here with us. Ignite Intimacy community. It's another powerful conversation. We'd love to hear from you. Please give us an email with insight, stories, comments. You can reach us at hello@igniteintimacy.com. That's hello@igniteintimacy.com. Thank you again, Elise. What a joy to have your beautiful, powerful energy on this show today. I trust that it will just reach far and wide into the interwebs and wavelengths of life worldwide. And we look forward to connecting with you again, staying in touch about your Yoni Power book and the Runway book. Wishing you the best of success.
And to you, dear woman, thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Mama. And to all of our community worldwide, thank you again for tuning in for another episode of Ignite Intimacy. Check us out on iTunes, leave a review, share this with your friends, and until the next one, stay blessed. Give thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out online at igniteintimacy.com and subscribe to us on iTunes. Also, tell your friends all about it. This beautiful music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey, and this podcast is produced by yours truly, Miss La. Give thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.